No, that's my gauge. You either love it or hate it. If you like Rush, you love Rush. If you don't, it's because of Geddy Lee.
Exactly. Welcome to Musing. Every once in a while, my brother George and I would have these conversations about music. Music is our passion, and it's a huge part of our lives, and we decided to share those conversations with you. So if you love music, sit back and enjoy this podcast. Okay, welcome back to Musing. Got my brother on the line.
What's up?
Not much. Kind of taking a break from having guests again. We might, I think we're going to have another guest returning, our first returning guest in the next couple episodes to kind of key off this one. This one is one we've been talking about for a while, and it kind of goes with another one, so it might end up being a two-parter if we can get our friend Pete Pardo back on to talk about the second part of this. And today we're actually going to talk about, let's see if I put this right, first albums that really didn't make a hit, and the second album was always what the band was known for. Is that kind of what we're going for?
I would go more with like obscure debut albums, maybe.
That's a good way of putting it.
They're not as, because I think there's some. I think the bands are there. I think there's some flashes of brilliance. I think there's an opportunity for. I mean. Anyway, go ahead. I think this is just more bands that are better known for their sophomore hits instead of a sophomore slump, maybe?
That's a better way of putting it. Much better way of putting it. I think that's kind of what we were, the idea we were going for is, that's
what I took from it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of where we might go if I can get Pete get back on with us. We'll kind of do the sophomore albums that were actually, the either the letdown or where they fell off, and the first albums were kind of like the hits. But let's kick up with this one today, and we were just talking a second ago before we started, and we do a little bit of research. We kind of take from these ideas are from what we enjoy about talking about music anyways, and we do a little bit of research. And it was interesting because I went out and looked for a couple bands that I thought their sophomore album was the one that had like the hits off of it, or the better songs, or the better radio play stuff.
Right.
And I'll give you an example of one that I was sorely mistaken, and I had to actually go back and listen to their entire first three albums because they were really good. But like Sugar Ray, Lemonade and Brownies was their first album, and
awkward silence.
But if you go back and listen to Lemonade and Brownies, you'll be shocked. You'd be really shocked.
I know they were pretty heavy, and they were more punk style, but the allure of radio. Oh, the allure of radio.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I was going with it. Is I know that they had a lot of hits off of an album that had like Someday, and I can't think of the other big one they had off there, but
Every Morning.
Yeah, Every Morning, and those were really big hits off of that album. I thought, well, that's probably got to be their second album, because that I know they were really punk when I listened to Lemonade and Brownies, and then I went back and I'm like, there was two more albums between those that were really good. I was kind of shocked. Yeah, I was kind of shocked.
I figured they had like 3 albums in a catalog. That was.
Yeah, it was kind of shocking when I went to it and looked at it and went, wow, this is some really good stuff too. So, but I digress. So again, we're talking about albums that, for me, actually, it's albums that I enjoy. That are albums that are close to my heart, and the ones I'm going to mention are ones that I've listened to for years, and I love them, and they were the reason I listened to these bands. And then that second album came out, and it was, it was the catalyst that put them into the limelight or put them onto the charts. And I'll kind of start with one of the biggest ones for me. And for me, it's the Too Fast for Love album by Motley Crue.
Yeah. That's valid. In general, I've never been a huge Motley Crue fan in general.
Right.
And I think this list is kind of based on, this was strange. I'm scarcely prepped, but because I was on vacation. But the Motley Crue's prominence, I wouldn't even say was their. I mean, they didn't come into prominence even on their second album. I wouldn't think. I mean, it was probably.
Yeah, and I thought about that too. And there was a couple songs that hit kind of big off the second album, but not near of what Theater of Pain did. I mean, Theater of Pain was obviously the bigger of the albums, but they were certainly had a lot more backing behind them in the second album. The quality and the recording quality was a lot better. There were a couple hits off that album that stood out pretty good. But that first album
was Theater of Pain this second album?
I think it was the third. I think Shout at the Devil was the third. I'll look it up, but
second, okay.
Yeah, so not being a fan, you'd obviously heard of the first album, right? I mean,
oh yeah, no, I mean the Beatles cover Helter Skelter, and which we kind of briefly discussed off air with Pete about the White or Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson just covered that song recently,
right?
And no, there was a lot of. I think it was more raw. I think it was probably one of their best albums before the cocaine and the strippers really hit hard. I think it kind of. Before
you get into it, Helter Skelter is actually on Shout at the Devil.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. The original one, their first album was Too Fast for Love had Live Wire.
Oh, right.
Merry Go Round, Take Me to the Top. Just a lot of raw stuff for me. I love the looseness of the music that they created in that, and his vocals felt a lot more like the glam era rock than it did.
That really high pitched wail
and so
it's shredding guitar. I mean,
and that's why I liked it. I really liked that it was so rough and that it was well written songs. And Shout at the Devil was okay, but it was just it wasn't. It kind of is where I started veering away from them. And I think was it? Yeah, Theater of Pain was number 3. That was their third album.
Gotcha.
And obviously, Home Sweet Home is, and Smoking in the Boys' Room. Yeah.
See, they're. I don't know. I mean, some of their bigger. I mean, I'd hate to say bigger hits were actual cover songs.
Exactly.
Early on, Smoking in the Boys' Room was a cover, and I again never a huge Motley Crue fan, but I would have to definitely agree with you to that extent that that's to me is by far one of their best albums and obviously one of their lesser knowns. Because everybody wants to hear Home Sweet Home and Girls 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 and
and Girls 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 obviously is the that's their fourth album, but it's still just put them over the top at that point. But I kind of feel. Go ahead.
I was going to say Girls 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 is kind of an undeniable 90, maybe 90, 91 somewhere that came out. Probably.
So. Let's see.
But
87.
Really, that early?
Yeah.
That's an excruciatingly late 80s hair metal album.
Yeah.
It just reeks of, the Whiskey a Go-Go and, Hollywood and I don't know, all the
LA
excess,
scene and stuff.
Yeah, the excess of that era, leather pants and headbands and teased hair, man. They can't deny they were a big part of that.
Well, and I kind of feel that we don't have to bounce back and forth, but I kind of feel the same way about that Motley Crue album as I do Metallica's first album. That even their second album really didn't put them over the top, but it was certainly more well known than Kill 'Em All. I mean, Ride the Lightning, put them on radio play.
Yeah. I don't think. Man,
let's just say there was no ballads on Kill 'Em All.
Well, yes, but I think Kill 'Em All is a front to back masterpiece.
Well, I agree with that, and I am certainly not denying that they had some hits off Kill 'Em All, but for me it feels like the Too Fast for Love album where it was really rough. That they weren't overproduced.
Oh no, I mean they were green and that was huge. That thrash metal scene hadn't really hit yet, and that's epic. And then I don't think anybody, I wouldn't say anybody. I don't think most, even in that scene, listened to that until Ride the Lightning, and then they went back and
Right.
like, oh my God, this is epic, and it turned into a, you know.
And that's exactly what I'm saying about the Motley Crue album. I think when Shout at the Devil came out and it really started getting some radio play, they went, wow, these guys are really good. Let's go see what else is there, and went back to Too Fast for Love. And that's kind of the way I felt about Metallica too. I was going to mention them as well, but I mean, when you look at Fade to Black, and that was like radio play song right there, and then Kill 'Em All got kind of started
because it was palatable. It wasn't thrash. I mean,
right, exactly.
Because I mean, obviously they're not going to play the Four Horsemen or Motor Breath or anything like that off. I mean, it just But see, I think nowadays, wow, I think we're in an era of. The acceptance is so much easier because Kill 'Em All was really horribly produced. I mean, Hetfield's vocals are like almost like an afterthought in a lot of the songs. They seem like they're in the background almost.
And so much echo on it, you can barely keep up with it.
Yeah, and the guitars are so overamped or so overdriven, or just. I mean, it's a horribly produced album, but it still holds water. Yeah, and I know that was early 80s, 82, 3, somewhere in there probably.
Let's see. Why don't you throw one of yours out and I'll jump back in with the Metallica year.
Well, mine's of that very same era. The first one I had was Picture This by Huey Lewis.
Ooh.
That until Sports hit, I don't think it was very appreciated with Working for a Living and Believe in Love.
Oh yeah, that was a really mellow song.
Yeah,
not very poppy.
I mean, no, and when Working for a Living, that got some radio play, and I've always been a huge Huey Lewis fan. I mean, I think the guy just made good tunes. Not obviously not metal or anything of that nature, but it was just good rock and roll. And I think their first album, Huey Lewis and the News. Picture This was the name of the album, and I think that was it should be revisited. I think it's not one of those that everybody is going to dig, but if you like Huey Lewis, I mean it's bread and butter. I mean it's and again it's not as epic as Metallica or Motley Crue, but I've always had a soft spot for Huey Lewis's music. And I don't know why, but when I was researching this, it just kept sticking in my mind that there's better music, or there's as good music before the Sports album, and before the mid '80s when Back to the Future made him in the forefront of radio play.
Right.
And I think it's an underappreciated album, and I always dug it, and I appreciate the fact that they sound, the last album they made sounds just like 1982's debut. So I think that, but they've always maintained an aura of change. Like it's all. I mean, there's just a lot of good music, a huge catalog, and a band that's been around for a long time. That the first album should be revisited if you're any kind of Huey Lewis fan.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes in general for all the stuff we're going to talk about probably today too. Is yes, they're kind of our personal preferences, but if you like these bands, go back and find these albums if you've never heard of them. Yes. And I will actually list. I'm going to list this next one. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to kind of let you probably riff off of it because you might know more about it. But I would say that if you're a Pantera Cowboys from Hell fan, just for fun, go back and listen to the albums before it.
I specifically avoided that because their first album they tried hair metal, and boy, it was really bad.
They actually had 3 albums before it. That's why I technically couldn't list this as one of my things. Power metal was, I think, the label, and the album just before it was called Power Metal, but they actually had 2 really small releases as well.
One was 83 too. One was
early.
Yeah.
Yes.
And horrible.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just set that one aside. But the rest of these, if you want to go back and listen to these first albums, just go give them a try, because they're close enough where you can kind of get the gist of what they were going for before. And
Right. I didn't want to move off Pantera too quickly, but my first one was kind of again, like a soft spot. But in that same, I don't know how you'd put it. In that same cloth, I don't know, maybe cut from the same cloth, was one of my favorite bands, Anthrax. They released an album, Metal Thrashing Mad. They had a different lead singer.
Oh, right.
And then I know we talked about this, and this is kind of a gray area, that they had a debut album with their former and current. There was a gap of a few years where John Bush of Armored Saint fame sang for the band. But Joey Belladonna's first album, Spreading the Disease, and he is back singing with the band, currently touring with them. And but Spreading the Disease to me was the first thing I heard from them was Among the Living, and I literally wore out 3 cassettes. Not joking. I literally, it was what I needed when I needed it in 1987. It was epic, and I'm like, what else? And then I started. That's basically what started me down this journey of what else is, they have more than one album. They have something else.
Yeah,
and then I started looking.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why we did this. And I think if you look at stuff like that, and you mentioned with a different singer on a different sound on a different album. AC/DC actually had a different singer before Bon Scott, and
Sure.
It was very poppy. And I don't really consider anything that they wrote or recorded with that singer kind of their first album, whether it was released or not. I think the first album is the band. And
Right.
so what you're saying is the first album had the band, it was just had a different singer, right?
Yeah, and there was Death Rider's good, Metal Thrashing Mad, the song itself, the album, the song of the same title
name
as the album. And it was good. I mean, it was really, really good. It was really heavy. I mean, that was first like New York thrashcore. I mean, that was
Yeah.
And it was, I always loved it. But when Joey's got a very melodic head, still has, a more melodic, and he brought a lot better writing, and he brought a lot better, vocal talent instead of that, early, I mean, they very easily could have slid into hair metal, with the original singer. I'm glad they, because if you've heard Madhouse,
which stepping aside, actually, that's probably one of my favorite Anthrax songs. Okay, back to your rant.
but the whole album itself, there's just a lot of great songs off that album. Medusa, the Gung Ho. There's just a lot of great music off that album that very, very rarely sees the light of day, especially by comparison to Among the Living or State of Euphoria. I mean, they've got probably maybe a dozen albums.
Yeah, I mean, you could be safe to say that if they're gonna play Anthrax on the rock radio nowadays, it's gonna be off Among the Living or State of Euphoria. It's not going to be off of something before that. So
yeah, and I mean, even the music they made with John Bush was adequate. But they're definitely a better. I think they're a better band with Belladonna. I always did, but I mean, that's just that's kind of another soft spot. So
I'll tell you a little story. I had to actually peg my wife on this one because she's a huge Cake fan. And Cake's biggest, radio hit was on Fashion Nugget, and it was The Distance. And I know they had an album before that, only because, again, she is a huge Cake fan, so anything Cake I have to listen to, but I like them, don't get me wrong. But Motorcade of Generosity was their first album. And since she's a huge Cake fan, I wanted to ask her, which one do you prefer, even though the other one's got the bigger hits and kind of how they got known for. And she actually prefers the first album too, so it kind of falls in line with what we were talking about. That, you might not like that first album, but I think that's what we're talking about here. Is why we got on to talk about it, is because we do like those first albums.
Sure.
And maybe even sometimes better than the second. And Cake was one of those bands again that, and when The Distance was big, I loved that song. Still love that song. Do you know anything off Motorcade?
No, I'm very much radio knowledge only of Cake. And of course they covered Mrs. Robinson from I think it was Simon and Garfunkel. And,
no, it was not the Jim Blossom. Somebody else did that. Lemonheads that did that one.
Are you sure?
Yeah, they covered.
Dude, look right now. You're setting your computer. I would bet you money Cake covered Mrs. Robinson.
I'm telling you, it's not. But hold on. I Will Survive is the one that Cake covered.
Yeah, I know they did that, but
I'll look the other one up in a second. But
okay.
I Will Survive is actually on Fashion Nugget too.
Oh, okay.
So again, they had a lot of pretty decent hits off of that first album. Or the second album, I'm sorry, which is what got them radio play. The first album is really kind of obscure. Rock and Roll Lifestyle was actually on it, and occasionally you'll hear that on the radio. But yeah, a lot of the other stuff on it is just kind of no-name stuff that they wouldn't, unless you're with somebody that likes them or you love them, you wouldn't have known that. And that's kind of their first album as well, hit me a little bit better as well, only because I listened to it through her, so... No.
Right. Well, that's definitely something I'm willing to check out because I'm not opposed to the band. I certainly enjoyed everything I've heard, but I'm most certainly not opposed. And that's the point of this podcast, is to get some knowledge and check some different stuff out. Maybe go back and revisit even bands you've heard of that you really like that you never really paid that close attention to or just heard them on the radio. So.
I looked up Mrs. Robinson, and it was Lemonheads that did the one in the 90s, but Bon Jovi actually covered it too. Oh, that hurts me.
Man, I would have lost large amounts of dollars.
I don't see them on the list. I found a list of actually people that have covered it, and they're not actually one of them. Frank Sinatra? Wow, crazy. Anyways, but yeah, I just wanted to bring up Cake because again, it was interesting to get an outside opinion of what we were talking about, and it fell kind of in line with us that,
right.
I'll go, I'll jump in with my next one. Bleach by Nirvana is, for me, a far better album for what I like as compared to Nevermind.
Right, because I think what draws us as music lovers to these first albums is the green cement. You can still push your thumbprint in it. They were raw. They weren't overproduced. They weren't overthought. They weren't oversold. They weren't over advertised. They were
writing music to write music.
Yeah, and I think I'd say most of the bands I listen to, and sellout is way too harsh of a word.
Yeah, it is.
I think most bands are forced into once you make that turn into that is your bread and butter. That's your money maker. You have to produce. You have to make something that's sellable, whether in concert or you either have to tour like there's no tomorrow if you don't get radio play, or you have to, now it's a different, you can sell stuff online or, stream and podcasts or whatever. There's infinite more ways to make money nowadays than when Bleach came out, even early 90s, 91 or something when that came out.
Yeah.
90, 91, somewhere in there. And likewise, I'm not to peel off Nirvana, but in the same genre and the same time frame, Helmet's first album, Strap It On, is bananas. They really, it is. I love Helmet, always have, and it. But this like songs like Bad Mood and Blacktop is just, it's got that everything I crave about Helmet, and nobody ever hears it. They always play Unsung or you know, anything off Wilma's Rainbow, and the Strap It On album is just beautifully raw. Everything is, it's like Helmet at its best. All they do is, I mean, there's, you know, missing beats, there's just crunching guitar. His vocals are just, just, you know, really great. And the whole thing, the whole time is very, it's a beautiful album. And if you're a fan of that band, even a little bit, do yourself a favor and just even go to YouTube and crack a couple of videos off Strap It On. I mean, Blacktop is one I would recommend.
Yeah, and they had really absolutely nothing on there that ended up having radio play off that first one. Yeah.
No.
In meantime, in Unsung, you couldn't turn on the radio without hearing it when that came out.
91, 2, whenever that came out, right? You literally could not hear.
Yeah, Meantime
Unsung.
was 92.
Yeah. And I think Strap It On might have been 90.
Yeah, it was 1990. It was 1990.
Yeah, as I say, it couldn't have been more than a year or two before that. But yeah, it's if you're a fan of Helmet at all, do yourself a favor and just get you some of that because it is gorgeous. It's the Meantime album on steroids. It really is.
Yeah, and I kind of think of, when I think of Helmet, I kind of think of that band Hum that I like. That, you know, it's one of those bands I've always been attracted to. They unfortunately never really got a hit other than Stars, and that was on their first album anyways. But I might have been on their second actually. Now that I think about it, but everything that I listened to by them, you know, the early stuff is so good, and it just, you know, they never went anywhere. But the Helmet was the same way. You know, I felt really connected to that band, and then I get to that Unsung, and they just played it to death. And then I did the same thing you did. Like 2 or 3 years later, I went back and said, what's this? They got another album, and went, this is good stuff. This is really good stuff.
And I'm a huge fan of Meantime. I mean, that's a front to back. I mean, an Unsung. I mean, even when I get to Unsung, I won't even skip that if I haven't heard it for a while. But and Wilma's Rainbow is just, they got progressively better, and they stayed out of I think they're one of the few that stayed out of that mainstream limelight pull, that he still made music to make, you know, that they wanted to listen to, that they wanted to make, that they wanted to hear. And I think they're one of the, I wouldn't say a few, but they're one of not too many that stuck to that mantra that just, okay, yeah, we got some radio plays, so what? We're still going to make this music whether radio plays it or not. And I think that was a rarity, especially in the early 90s when grunge and hair metal were just in a big pot of stew being stirred around, and you had some thrash metal in there, and the radio was really getting ramped up on just playing, seeing what they could get away with playing. And I think Helmet kind of stayed on the fringe a lot of that time.
Well, but I think that idea that you just talked about, though, ties back into Bleach and Nevermind, and in the fact that Nevermind wasn't, as you kind of put it harshly, but it wasn't necessarily a sellout for them, because it still had the same kind of dirty sound that they had with Bleach. It was just a lot more corporate and commercialized. And
it's a lot more produced.
But okay, that's a better way of saying it. Corporate and commercialized, probably too harsh as well.
Sure.
But that ties into that same idea that you were just saying, is, they stayed true to what they wanted to play. That first album was just kind of like their experiment, or their testing the waters to see what's out there. And the record company going, we'll try it.
I look at Bleached as almost like a demo.
Yeah, exactly.
It is very, very hard edged. I mean, there's a lot of, like, whoa.
Really, it feels like a demo. It does feel a lot like a demo, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of areas where there's feedback, where there's, you wouldn't normally have that in a recording. You have, mistakes in vocals or mistakes in drum, drops.
Right.
Yeah, so I could see that. I could definitely see that, but I don't think that fits the Helmet album though. I think their
Oh
first
no,
one was
no.
really produced well. It just didn't. It was a little bit early for the timing
Yeah, and I
for
think it. I
for
mean,
that sound.
once grunge hit, I think they realized they were kind of in a gray area. Helmet was in a
Yeah,
gray area. Like they're kind of metal, they're kind of grunge, they're kind of. I
that's
don't know
kind
what
of
we do with them.
that's kind of
Let's
where
throw
Hum
them a
fit.
yeah. Let's throw
Hum,
them a radio bone, and then well, okay, nobody really went after it. So okay, well, you guys can make some money, if you tour your asses off or whatever. So
Well, I'm looking at my list and I'm realizing that really pretty much everything that I have on here is almost in the grunge era. So I'm just gonna kind of finish it out with some more
yeah, go ahead.
grunge. Not finish it out, but I'm gonna kind of continue with. So for me, Gish by Smashing Pumpkins is an amazingly better album than Siamese Dream. And
Really?
yeah, I and I thought maybe that I was mistaken. And I thought when we started talking about this, I remember listening to Gish and thinking, man, this is really good. And it was while Siamese Dream was out, and I'm like, why are these other songs getting played when there's some amazing songs on Gish that aren't getting radio play? And I went back and listened to it again in preparation for this, and I went through the whole album. I'm like, this is why I liked Smashing Pumpkins. A lot of their stuff off of Siamese Dream and Melancholy and stuff were, I love those albums, but Gish is why I liked Smashing Pumpkins.
Okay. I'm going to say that I'm going to disagree
Sure.
and base it on ignorance. I'm going to have to go back because I never got anything out of that first album and I haven't listened to it for years.
Are you talking about Gish?
So yes.
Okay.
So right now I'm going to disagree and base that completely and 100% on ignorance. I have no earthly. I couldn't even tell you a song off of that. It's been so long since I've listened to it.
You're gonna hold judgment, is what you're saying, basically.
Well, yeah, basically, yeah, because I like Smashing Pumpkins. I think Siamese Dream was probably one of the most. No, I wouldn't say most. It's a very underrated album of the '90s in a sea of overrated music.
Yeah. Well, his voice is really good for people or really bad for people. I mean,
Yeah,
you
it's
really love it or
Lee.
you love it or you exactly. That's the perfect example.
Yes.
Description of what it is.
Yeah. No, that's my gauge. You either love it or hate it. If you like Rush, you love Rush. If you don't, it's because of Geddy Lee.
Exactly.
You cannot deny the talent of those three dudes, but if you don't like Rush, it's because of his voice. And that's I bet that's a 99th percentile of why.
So are any of your other ones stuck in grunge land, or do you want me to throw?
Not
Okay.
Not really. The closest one would be was Shinedown's first one, Leave a Whisper.
Interesting.
I am not ashamed of. I love Shinedown. I think his voice is, I think, one of the best in contemporary rock music today. Rock and metal, I guess they'd be considered metal mostly. But he's very, very melodic, but he can really get after it. And their new song off their new album, Devil, is exquisite. I really think it's some of their best. Their new album is some of their best work. But the song 45 got a lot of radio play off the first album. But the rest of the album was very, very was good, was better than that song.
Yeah, the music industry really shrugged it.
Yes, I really think that I think they took that song as a mantra, back in that "Woe is me," and it was soon after Cobain had killed himself. I think it was 95. It was a year or two after I think Cobain killed himself when that album came out, and I think they kind of latched on to that, staring down the barrel of a 45, and they really wanted that, like they wanted it to be an anthem, I think, and they overplayed the crap out of it, but the whole album, I think was way better than that. And I think they've gotten progressively better, but I think that's an overlooked gem. And again, in a early mid 90s sea of mediocrity, I think that was actually a really great album. And I think they've gotten better since, but I would hold that up against a lot of albums of that era.
Yeah.
Mid 90s.
Yeah, I would say that too. And I haven't really dug enough into the first album. I'll kind of, feign the same thing that you said about Smashing Pumpkins. I haven't dug enough into that album to know. So I can't really disagree. I'm not a huge fan of theirs anyways. So again, it's just, I don't know. And it's odd too, because I think his voice is good, but it just doesn't work for me. Like, it's just not a voice that I like to listen to. But talent is amazing there. So.
Oh yeah. Have you the first single released off Attention is Devil.
Yeah, I did hear it on the radio.
They've always impressed me with their writing. Their writing has always been, to me, above average as far as what's out there. There's a lot of radio, pollution, but their music always seems to have a message. And I like the fact that him and Zach, the guitar player, Brent and Myers and Smith, they have like an acoustic cover album and stuff like that, where they do a lot of covers. And I think the ability to wail and to pull it down and really get stripped down, I appreciate that as much as anything. But the first album, not to get too far off tangent, the first album of Shinedown, I think is one of my missed gems as far as a debut album.
So,
Leave a Whisper was the name of it. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm gonna jump back. I got one on the list that actually will take us back a little bit. We actually talked about Metallica, and I'm gonna go with Megadeth and Killing Is My Business as compared to Peace Sells. So obviously they weren't on the same level that Metallica was at the time, even though Mustaine came from Metallica. Well, they were making kind of the same music, but they just weren't on the same level that Metallica was. But Peace Sells had a lot of push at the time.
Right.
I mean, it was radio play, it was, video play, MTV play. But Killing Is My Business is actually a better album for me.
Yeah, that's
This isn't the parting shot yet, so
no, it's I think they're both good.
Yeah, that was kind of why I wasn't sure I was going to go with this one as one anyways, but once I started reading it and reading the list and listening to what you put on the list as well, it still fits that feel for me, because I at the time that the Peace Sells was starting to get radio playing on the TV, that's when I was starting to listen to that kind of music.
Yes.
And as soon as I heard that first song, I went out to see what they had. I'm like, ooh, Killing Is My Business. Let me try that instead. And man, there is some just on fire songs. I mean, it's like, it's literally like putting your head in a blender type songs.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I guess it kind of, I hate to say confuses this list a little bit for me, but I see what you're saying. It's definitely not, I don't want to say overlooked. I mean, I think.
Well, I mean, there wasn't much radio play off the first album, though.
No, that's true. I mean, Peace Sells obviously got all the, got the full court press, and then from then on, I mean, they were pretty much, well known. And yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot, man, it's just hard to think that, I guess because I like it so much, it's hard to think that it's overlooked. Maybe I'm
and that's where I fell with some of
blinders on.
It's where I fell with some of these as well, and I kind of had to step back and look at, what album got them the hits, what album got them on the charts, what album put them in the regular listening rotation.
No, I get it.
Yeah, when you look at Bleach, obviously they didn't have anything that got a lot of radio play, but Nevermind had, 4 or 5 hits off of it. So that's kind of the way I felt about Megadeth too, because again, I love the album. I could listen to, again, Killing Them Is My Business is something that I will listen to before I go to P-Cells.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did Killing Is My Business have the Sex Pistols cover?
It had, no, that was on, was it on Killing?
So Far, So Good, So What?
Yeah, it was. It was on that one. They actually covered These Boots on Killing Is My Business, which it was. I could take that song off and probably be okay with.
Well, yeah,
but yeah, I just wanted to kind of dip back into that because again, that was just one of those ones that I could just listen to the first one nonstop, and the second one's great, but just not my preference. So
yeah, so I guess I'm kind of biased because I think the first album is just as good, but you're right as far as like recognition or radio play or acknowledgement. Yeah, that's definitely I could see how it made your list. Yeah.
You got anything else hanging out that you want to?
I had one more there. Okay. It's kind of a curveball for you especially, and I know I've always kind of, well, I haven't always, but for the last 7-8 years or so, the Black Keys. The Big Come Up. I know you're not a big rock blues fan in general. This is strictly mine, but the Big Come Up was their first album, and there's just a plethora, and it falls into this. I mean, I know you're not very knowledgeable on the band either, but it falls into the same category of it was raw. It was just two guys, literally, it's so stripped down. It's so underproduced. It's just, to me, it's why I listen to music. I love the music, love the band, but that goes without saying, because they made my list. But their first album, they've had some radio songs as of late, some rock radio songs, and they get a lot of commercial usage and stuff, so I would even use the term sell out to a minor extent.
Okay.
But the first album is just gold for me. It's so raw. It makes Bleach look like like a Kanye West album. It really is raw. I think they may have even produced it themselves in a closet. It is so. The acoustics are so bad, but the music is so good, and the production is so bad, but the music is so good, and it's just it. If you're a fan of them at all, the first album, The Big Come Up, and I won't stay too long because I know it's not in your wheelhouse or even necessarily this podcast's wheelhouse, because we do a lot with rock and metal and so on and so forth. But if you're looking for a little bit to give your ears a break. Once in a great while. The Black Keys it's on the same vine of not as Texas bluesy as a Stevie Ray Vaughan, but very, very melancholy blues rock. And they got some jams too. I mean, they got some good stuff.
Well, I mean, they've got a lot of radio play off of other albums, so
late, sure.
Yeah, it's not like you're naming something that's some outside band that's
Oh, sure.
They're pretty popular on the radio, so I'm gonna have to go listen to that. You mentioned that it's kind of not in my wheelhouse, and a lot of the stuff is not. The singer-songwriter stuff is kind of not something I go for, and these guys the same way, not something I really go for, but I'm certainly up for listening to that kind of stuff and just giving it a try. I mean,
sure.
I will grab stuff when people suggest it and listen to it, and I'll give it a good listen before I say, hey, this isn't for me. But yeah, I'm certainly gonna look that one up then. Now that you've basically compared Bleach to a Kanye West album, so that there's got to be something to it.
Well, I mean, as far as production wise,
I know, I knew where you were going.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, to me, the big come up is as raw as an album can sound. Bleached it's literally in the same mold. It's so, like you said, there's missed notes. It's almost hard to listen to. Like, it's like a demo. It's like, my God, you guys really put this out? Somebody put somebody bought this, but it really shows the depth of where Nirvana came from, where the Black Keys come from.
Yeah.
It really shows the chops that these guys have as musicians, as singers, as songwriters, as a band, that makes me want to listen to them or find out more about them or do a podcast involving them. And that's basically what it's all about for me. So,
well, and I think I'll probably end with my kind of favorite as well. I think, when we talk about the things that we've talked about albums that we are akin to, but my favorite example of this is always going to be the Kerplunk album by Green Day as compared to Dookie. And there's so few people out there that know that they have an album. Technically, they had two. One of them was with a different drummer, and it was just only released on cassette and vinyl. But Kerplunk was actually released on CD. I think the songs on it are so much better than Dookie. And it's not actually underproduced. It's actually produced quite well. But there's a lot of good songs and a lot of good, well-written story songs and well-written, great lyrics. And the music was amazing. And I listened to Dookie and I'm like, this is one of those ones that does feel like a sellout. That feels like Dookie was just, hey, let's put a label and a marketing and behind it and make some songs that will sell on the radio. So,
yeah, I'm going to. I mean, this is a slight crossroads for you and I. I've never been a Green Day fan. I don't know why. I mean, I love punk. I mean, I love, there's song. I mean, I shouldn't say. I mean, I don't dislike Green Day. I just never.
Dude, I am totally the same way of anything past Kerplunk. I every time I hear something by them, it's not like I'll reach up and turn it off. I mean, it'll come on and I'll be like, right. Okay. But if the Green Day and Kerplunk and the Green Day Dookie Plus are different bands for me. And even the little EP that they made before had some shining moments on it, but it was very bleach. It was very underproduced and very loose. And there wasn't a lot good that came out of it. Kerplunk is definitely that's Green Day for me. Everything past that is like, it's okay. I mean, I'll listen to it, but whatever.
Can we just right now agree that if I ever hear that acoustic, another turning point, another fork stuck in the road or whatever song?
Yeah. No, that one I will turn off. I lied. I will actually turn that one off.
Okay. Right.
That one will turn. If the radio it comes on the radio, it goes off.
There's overplayed, there's oversold, and then there's that song.
Yeah. That's the 90s rock and roll all night for me.
Oh man. I don't even have words. Well, that should have been your parting shot.
No,
I can't even.
Since you don't have words, I'll just go ahead and throw the parting shot out at you. We can get it out of the way, and you can just stammer a little bit more. I actually have two, but I'm going to pick the one that I think will cause more of a conversation. We're getting kind of close to the end, but I think this is going to cause more of a conversation. The other one I had is more preference than anything else because both of them were huge hits, but I'm going to actually throw the one that's going to give you more of a really deep thought process. So, Core or Purple? So let me give you some stats real quick.
Core, go ahead.
Core had 2 songs on the album that broke the top 10 in the U.S. rock U.S. top 100.
If I could have one album on a desert island, it would be Core. Go ahead.
So they had only two on it that broke the top 10. Okay.
Go ahead.
Purple had 4 in the top 10. 4 off that entire album in the top 10 rock. Yeah. 3 of them in the U.S. alternative were in the top 10.
You're wasting your breath. Core, to me, is inexplicable. I literally no. I mean, I could stammer all night and try to explain. That album changed the way I heard music.
Well, and I think that's why I was so confused with the stats. I think when I looked at the stats and I looked at the songs that came off of Purple, and people do know about Core because there's songs played on the radio off of Core.
Sure.
But
Sure.
I think the people that liked Stone Temple Pilots when they came out, Big Empty and Interstate Love Song and Vaseline were the songs that were played that drew people to Stone Temple Pilots.
Yeah.
And I think their first album, like you said, I agree 100% with you. I'm certainly not arguing with you. Their first album is far above their second album. But their second album is what put them on the radio. Sort of. Because they, songs like, Creep and Plush were big songs, but I don't think they really got traction until the other album came out, and then it started picking up.
When the very first, I could tell you where I was, and the very first song I heard was Sex Type Thing.
Yeah.
And done. All in. No questions asked. And then I listened to the rest of the album, and I haven't stopped listening to that album over and over and over. That album, I told you, I started to say, if I could have one album on a deserted island and only one album to listen to for my whole time, it would be Core by Stone Temple Pilots.
Wow, that's insane.
I think Scott Weiland's vocals and the DeLeo brothers,
guitar,
it's magic.
Yeah,
that album is the best debut album for me, other than Boston. That if we're going metal, no, seriously, Core. That's not even a question. Well, I know Purple has, okay, if you want to say radio player or chartable hits or whatever, but.
Yeah, I think that was the problem. Is I found a small list of just guys talking back and forth about better releases than the sophomore that were popular, and this one came up like a couple times, and I'm like, I would have thought Core was a lot more popular, and I went and did a little research, and I said, man, they really didn't get. I mean, the radio play, how you look at what's on it. They had the U.S. airplay. They only had 2 songs in the top 100 off of that first album, which is shocking.
That's insanity.
Yeah, and you go to the airplay on the other one, and they had 3 songs in the top airplay, but they were all under 50. One of them was 18. Interstate Love Song was played, 18th popular on U.S. airplay. So yeah, it was a little shocking to me that people brought it up, A, and then B, when I went and looked at the actual numbers, I'm like, wow, this actually is true. That first album just wasn't there.
That's staggering as far as that goes. But I mean, there's no comparison.
I agree.
As far as, man, I don't even want to debate.
That's why it's a parting shot.
Well, I mean, I don't want to debate Stone Temple Pilots against Stone Temple Pilots. I mean, Purple is a great album. I mean, I like all of their work, including their new one with Jeff Gutt, their new singer.
God, that guy is insanely good.
No, the DeLeo boys, they got. I mean, it took them a long time, but they found. I mean,
look, it's creepy.
I'll
just say it. It's
Alice in Chains did this. Lane Staley they did the same thing in Alice in Chains. The guy they got to replace him sounds eerily the same too, but this Jeff Gutt guy is the same but different.
Yeah, it's
stupid phrase.
It's weird. No, it's weird because this guy has the same feel. I mean, yes, he sounds a lot. He sounds identical to him, but he has the same feel about how he sings too, which is uncanny.
No, and I think that's what drew the feel of Stone Temple Pilots is always what keeps pulling me back to them as far as, a mainstream popular rock, metal, grunge, whatever genre you want to put them in, band. They just, man, that first album is that's bread and butter, man. That's meat and potatoes. That's how you do rock and roll to me. It's a work of art in a very, very, very muddy gallery. There's a lot of great music we've talked about it since the dawn of time, since the 50s. There's been great music. I mean, if you're a music fan and you can't pick something that you like or something that you can at least appreciate from any era, then you're doing it wrong. Because as much as I don't like country music, I could probably pick you even a half dozen songs that are brilliant.
You mean like the Dukes of Hazzard theme song?
Yeah, not that one. But there is a level of if you appreciate music, you have to appreciate talent. Yeah. And if you don't appreciate the talent that still beating the drum for Stone Temple Pilots, if you don't appreciate that kind of talent, then it's really not your bag. Or if you just like music in passing, that's fine. But if you're not passionate about it, like you and I are, and a lot of people that listen to this and that we talk to about it are, but have a lot of knowledge on it. There are certain things that are undeniable. The first Stone Temple Pilots album, Scott Weiland and that whole band, I mean, struck the nail squarely on the head and buried it for me, because that's one of the best debut albums, and is I would put that up against a lot of bands now, even.
Oh yeah, easily.
So
yeah, no, I think that's a good tie-up and might lead into hopefully our next one which will be kind of the big debut albums for bands, and they kind of fell off. So good tie-up, brother. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, like I said, hopefully we can get Pete on in the next one, and if not, maybe the one after. But it'll kind of be a tag onto this anyways, and we'll get together in a couple weeks and we'll do this again.
Yeah, sounds like fun. I'm in.
Cool. Thanks, brother, for hanging out.
All right, bro. We'll talk to you next time.
Yep. See ya.
See ya.
We want to talk to you about music, so reach out to us at musicmusingfeedback@gmail.com.
You can also find us on most social media sites by searching Music Musing or George or Craig Seibert, Sybert.
And you can also find us on Twitter as musicmusing_ as well.
Thank you for listening to this Music Musing podcast.